Hey guys, so this video is going to be about reaching mid-game in King's Raid. So first let's start off with defining what mid-game is. So there's three stages of the game for most players, in pretty much all games. You've got the early game, which is when you're just starting out, you don't have much, you're really weak, and it lasts for the first few weeks usually in most games. In a game such as League of Legends or Overwatch, well, Overwatch doesn't really have it, but in games such as League of Legends, early game would be the first 5 to 10 minutes when you don't have any items and you're pretty weak. And that's what early game is. It's just you haven't got any items yet, your power level is at the lowest it's ever going to be, and you're just starting out. Late game is the total opposite. Late game is when you have all your items, you are fully advanced. In King's Raid, your team is max level, you've got dragon gear equipped. Endgame is endgame. You're doing raids, you're starting to try to get ranked on the world boss, your guild is pushing hard past normal raids. That's what endgame is. Midgame is kind of the sweet spot in between those. You're not a total noob, you're past at least level 40 or 50 with your heroes. You can start doing dragons. You probably have at least level 60 so you can do the world boss when they open up. You've joined a guild, but you're not really contributing much in terms of damage. Your team is still pretty weak. Even if you transcended a few of them, they're not max level. And your gear is a mishmash of dragon gear, ancient gear, and heroic gear. So reaching mid-game is fairly simple. You will reach mid-game just by playing the game. But in order to reach it in the most optimal way, there's a few things you want to do. So to start off with, you want to blitz through the story as fast as possible. And each chapter can be done 4 times. So you can do easy, normal, and hard in each chapter once you've beaten the stages earlier level. So if I've beaten a stage on easy, I can unlock normal and fight that. Once I beat it on normal, I can unlock hard. And then hell mode you unlock once you've beaten chapter 6's final boss on, I want to say on normal or hard. And you don't need to beat all of chapter 6, you just need to beat the final boss of it on normal or hard. So you don't need to clear it for the hard mode clear. So experience in this game, if I go over here for a second, you can see easy mode gives 222 experience, normal 278, hard 348, and then hell, we'll ignore this jump on the chapter 1 just because hell mode is kind of, it's around chapter 7ish. Once you can beat chapter 6 hard, you want to start looking going into chapter 1 hell. So it's a little bit of a difficulty spike. Now, remember that hard is 348, right? Now, the important thing is a lot of people think, oh, if I can do hard mode, it's better to do hard mode on an earlier chapter than easy or normal on a later chapter. But that's not true. In fact, every chapter is an instant experience boost. If I go to 2-1 here, easy mode's already at 512. That's half again the experience you were getting on hard mode for chapter 1. And then hard mode here is 800. And it's the same going up and up. And then recently they revamped the experience for early game players. So if you just purely want experience, experience to stamina ratio is actually best if you can do chapter 6 hard rather than doing chapter 1 hell. But chapter 1 hell has better drops because the drops in hell mode are essences. So to improve your team, you need fragments. And you get fragments from what are called the upper dungeons. So the upper dungeon, if you press portal, is always the named one in every chapter. So Black Gunpowder Storage, Tribal Outpost, Valley of the Red Earth, so on and so forth, up to Forgotten Desert Wind Caves and the Ice Crystal Cave up in chapter 7. And you only get 5 keys a day to do this, and the keys are shared between all of the dungeons here. So if you go into the Forgotten Desert Wind Caves 5 times, you cannot enter the Black Gunpowder Storage. And Black Gunpowder Storage gives the least number of fragments per run. So if possible, your first day that you start playing, if possible, try to at least get to chapter 2, because you only get 3 fragments doing the Black Gunpowder Storage. But if you go to the Bloody Tribal Wings Outpost, and go over here, you get 5 fragments, which is 2 extra fragments or 10 extra fragments over the night, 25 as opposed to 15 with your 5 keys. And fragments is going to be the thing that limits you getting to mid-game and eventually endgame the most. Because to upgrade a hero, if I go over here to my arch, you can see that just to get a 3-star to a 4-star, you need 80 of 3 different types of fragments. That's 240 fragments. Chapter 2, if you run it all 5 times in a day, which you should, and you should run the highest one you can run every day. Don't bother running any of the lower ones, just run the highest one you can do. Only gives 25 fragments total, 5 times 5. Which means if you're trying to get a 3-star to a 4-star, you need to do it 9.5 times. So that's 9.5 days just to get a single 3-star to a 4-star doing Chapter 2. Now, obviously, you're not going to be doing Chapter 2. You'll probably wind up doing, if I had to guess, either Altar of the Undead or Valley of the Red Earth for after about your first week. And there are multiple other ways to get fragments. They're a random drop. You can get them, if you're part of a guild, it's part of the guild rewards that you can get. You can get them in the gacha. Like, there's plenty of ways to get fragments, but the upper dungeon is your main way. So once you get up to the Altar of the Undead here, you can see you get 7 fragments a run, which is 35 fragments for your 5 runs, which is a little better. And there's a lot of ways to pretty much expand upon the number of fragments you can get in a day, but they mostly involve rubies. So the main way is half an hour before the server reset, you go to your inventory, and what you'll need is a consumable called the Loot Booster. And you can buy this for rubies in the special shop. So if I go to consumables, here it is, so 500 rubies. And what it does is it adds +1 of the same loot. And then you run this, and instead of 7, you get 14 with the Loot Booster every time you run it. And then you use 100 rubies to recharge it once, and then 200 to recharge it again. And each recharge gives you 5 keys, which means you run it 15 times. Then the server will reset. You'll get your 5 runs recharged back to full again. You'll do the same thing for the next half hour, which means in the process of an hour, you'll use 2 days worth of runs, as well as 600 rubies, 2 times 100 and 2 times 200, and 500 more rubies for the Loot Booster, which is 1100 rubies. But you will have gotten to run the mission 30 times in total at double the loot, which is the equivalent of 60 runs in just 2 days worth. So normally in 2 days you get 10 runs. This is you're making it 6 times more at the cost of 1100 rubies. So most people recommend that the earliest you do this is over in the entrance to Blackthorn Fortress or even at Forgotten Desertwooden Caves. But personally, I found it a pretty good idea to do it at the Altar of the Undead, just because I really felt that fragments were really my biggest limitation. And by doing them at the Altar of the Undead, I managed to get several hundred fragments, 60 times 7, 420 fragments every time I did it. I think I did it 3 times. And this really allowed me to jump all my heroes up to about 5-star and also start transcending them a little earlier than I would have been otherwise. So fragments are definitely going to be your biggest obstacle. So that's something you definitely want to take advantage of doing that. But there's a lot of other things you want to do to get to mid-game as well. Obviously, you want to progress through the story, and you need fragments to start your heroes up. But your heroes also need gear. So I'd say the 3 things that would make you a mid-game player would be your entire team at about 5-star or higher, so 5-star to Transcendence 1, and at least about level 50 to 60. And even then, you're not going to be very powerful. Like, I'd still consider myself a mid-game player, and my heroes are all above level 70. And I'm going to be a mid-game player for quite a bit longer. I need to get them to, I'd say, once I hit level 80, and have them all in dragon gear, or at least ancient gear. I'll be considered at the beginning of the end game. But to the other 2 things, the gear and the levels, you really just need to grind. Go to the highest story mode you can. So for me, I can do Chapter 1 Hell, or I can go to Chapter 6 and just grind. You find a map that has the best place to grind in the place for you. So in terms of experience and easiness, you want to make sure you can do it 100% of the time so that you don't fail. And then you just go on auto repeat until your stamina is out every day. And try to take advantage of the hot time for this. So hot time occurs every day, server time of 12 to 2, and then 8 to 11 at night. So 1200 to 1400 hours, and then again at 2000 to 2300 hours. And hot time gives you 100% experience boost and 100% gold boost. And in addition to this, also try to join a guild as soon as possible, because a guild gives you a 30% experience boost and a 30% gold gain boost if the guild has all the guild buffs. So if I go to my guild here, I'm in a pretty decent guild. They have all the guild buffs. We can clear the normal raid every week. We're starting to try to progress into the hard raid, although I'm not going to be too much use of there for a while. And the biggest thing about a guild isn't just the progression, it's guild coins. So whenever you use stamina during the day or participate in the guild raid, you'll get guild coins. And you can use these to primarily buy stamina potions, but even better than stamina potions, whenever you clear a guild boss, so I didn't claim mine for the last guild boss of the week yet, you can buy fragments, 80 fragments for 800 coins, and 40 skill books of a random class and a random type for that class, for only 400 fragments, or coins rather. And 80 fragments every time you kill a guild boss, especially when you're doing a normal. Like, the normal guild raid has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, there's 6 bosses. This is the hard. Normal's a bit easier. And 6 bosses times 80 is 480 fragments every week just from doing the guild bosses. That's an entire loot boosted double night right there, in chapter 4 or 5. That's a lot of fragments. Like 480 fragments a week, that's a lot of fragments. And the 30% experience boost, the 30% gold gain boost, as well as a bunch of the other items. Like skill books, skills are actually very powerful. Like, so if I go over to the stockade here and first go to my heroes, you can see that my Raw here has all his skills maxed out, which has made him a lot more powerful than he was when he didn't have his skills maxed out, especially for Blade Claw, which is my Raw's main damage move. For your main DPS, try to, at the very least when you're doing stockade, once you can beat the normal stockade, which is, alright, so it's not unlocked yet apparently, despite it being 40 minutes after the reset. Once you can beat the normal stockade, you'll get 8 stockade books every time. And it's important to note, loot boosting does not work on the stockade, but you can still reset the stockade for 100, 200, 400, 800, and so on rubies. So what I like to do is, if I really need the books for a certain character to max out one of their skills, I'll pay 100 rubies, or even up to 300 rubies for the second one, so that I can get the skill books for that character to make them much more powerful. And this is especially important for your main DPS, because your main DPS is really what dictates how you'll move through the story. So you want to prioritize your main DPS, then your tank, then your sub DPS, and then your healer. And this is because your main DPS determines if you can actually clear the run or not. If you can't beat the boss for the enrage timer, you're going to lose. Your tank determines if you can survive the run or not. And then your sub DPS helps the main DPS, and then your healer keeps them all alive. Now obviously if you feel that your entire team's dying, even though your tank's been upgraded really quickly, try and upgrade your healer before your sub DPS. But in general it goes main DPS, tank, sub DPS, healer in terms of upgrade priority. So choose your main DPS and really just focus hard on them. They should always be the first one you awaken and then later transcend. They should be the one that you give the most skill books to. They should be the one that you give the best gear to and farm the best gear for. Your tank, while he is the second most important, as long as the tank is capable of tanking, you don't really need to focus on them anymore as a mid-game player. Until your tank becomes unable to focus on tanking, you don't really need to bother with their gear. My Klaus is perfectly fine tanking Chapter 1 Hell, so I haven't bothered with the gear for a while. Right now I'm focusing on getting my Roa into full dragon gear. However, once my Klaus starts to have more problems tanking, I will, of course, start to focus on his gear again. So for mid-game player, really, you're just looking to streamline your path to endgame. You want to be grinding experience most efficiently, which means doing the best experience to stamina stage you can, or doing hell mode for the essences. You want to be getting as many fragments as you possibly can so that you can awaken and later transcend your team. And the two important ones are 5-star awakening and transcendence. Because of the recent changes, 5 stars can now actually reach level 70. And then once you transcend them, they only need to be Transcendence 1 to get all the way to level 80, which is max level in the game. So getting them to 5-star and then transcending your DPS and your tank are probably the most important things to do in terms of progression, just because 71 is such a huge boost in terms of damage, in terms of survivability, because tier 7 gear is much better than tier 6 gear, and it's not that hard to find a carry for the dragons. So let's get to the last part, which is gear. So leveling, just focus on getting through the story as fast as possible. Whenever you're stuck, just farm stages to get yourself gear of the highest tier you can currently equip for a character. Make sure your characters are all at least at a level where they can use the current gear of the stage. And if they are not all, at least make sure that your DPS is the highest level in your team. You can use the loot booster trick to get as many fragments as possible to help get you to the beginning of mid-game a bit faster. And then once you've got your team to about level 60, 70, once you have your team at all level 61, even at 51 really, what you should do is go to all your heroes, go to your flasks, and give everyone that's not your DPS an empty flask. And then what you'll do is all their experience will go into these empty flasks. Your empty flasks, every time they fill them up, will become an experience potion and will be replaced with a new empty flask. And these experience potions you will then feed to your main DPS. So if I quickly look at this, you can see my main DPS is pretty damn close to being able to hit level 80. In fact, he might actually be able to now. Let's try this. Oh, yep. My Raw is officially level 80. Sweet. Alrighty. So yeah, getting your DPS as high level as possible is important for the stats, because King's Raid is a game where stats really matter and levels really affect your stats. My Raw, if you look at his stats here, you can see at level 80 he has 19,592 base attack. My Maria, despite having a higher base attack than Rod every time they're the same level, has only 18,904 attack, and her physical defense and magical defense is far lower at 2,520, 3776. You can see my Raw's is like double those. So get your DPS as high level as possible. At the very least, get them to the break point for the next tier. Getting your DPS to 61 and then taking out the empty flasks and leveling the rest of your team. Don't put an empty flask on your DPS. Let him keep gaining experience. Will allow your DPS to equip tier 6 gear, which will allow him to pretty much double or triple his damage compared to tier 5 gear. Tier 7 gear is exactly the same. And what you do, and another big advantage of a guild, is you can ask your guild for carries. You can ask them to carry you in the raids, in the dragon raids, which is where you get the best tier of gear in the game, dragon gear. So darkness gear is probably the best for most heroes, although a few DPS types will want to use fire gear. I have some on my Maria just because I haven't bothered to upgrade it yet. But really, you cannot go wrong with dark gear. That mana recovery is huge in increasing your DPS or your heals per second, or even the survivability of the team if it's, for example, your tank that has it. So getting some carries will allow you, even if you don't get like amazing gear, like I want to say, yeah, my staff here is pretty whatever. You can still equip it just because tier 7 gear is way better than tier 6 or even 5 gear, the same type. This Swift Darkness staff gives 26,000 attack, whereas this plus 15 Epic Spear only gives 10,000 attack. Like, that is a huge difference, even if it is legendary to heroic gear. And that's really the final key to becoming a strong player. A mid-game player is really just a want-to-be end-game player. You're an end-game player that isn't at the end game. Your team isn't max level, your team isn't fully equipped, but you're striving to get there. You're trying to bring your entire team into the end game. And that's what mid-game is all about. Just doing what you did to get out of the early game and enhancing the level of your team. So the reason I made this video is for people that want to pick stuff up. Whenever I say if you're a mid-game player, you should pick this, or if you're a mid-game player, focusing on this is a good idea. Getting to mid-game, so trying to organize my thoughts here. Basically, the King's Raid and Vespa packs that are coming out next week in the first year anniversary event. The King's package gives 2 Transcendence 1 hero tickets, as well as a random unique weapon on top of the unique weapon. But it gives less fragments, and that's good for early game players that can't farm fragments properly, that don't have a very powerful team. They probably have like 3 stars. But for a player that has a team that's already at 5-star, or even has a few transcended units, while 2 T1 tickets is nice, they've already got their team fairly set. And the 3-star ticket from the raid package, as well as the increased amount of fragments and gold and everything else the raid package gives, is much better for a mid-game player because they don't need that kind of shortcut to having Transcendence 1 heroes and to having more experience. They can just use all the stuff from the raid package to enhance the power of their current team, and then use the 3-star ticket from the raid package to choose someone new to help create another team or to help diversify their current team. Anyways, guys, in summary, to get to mid-game, really you just need a team to get your team to about 5-star or Transcendence 1 and start equipping them in full tier 5 or tier 6 gear. So really all you have to do is run through the story, use the loot booster trick if you're really stuck for fragments, be kind of patient. King's Raid isn't a game that you can just play all day. There are stamina limitations. Even if you have a lot of stamina pots, you will run out eventually. And just always do the hardest stage you can do. While Hell, it's important to note that Hell does give less experience per stamina use than Chapter 6 Hard, but Hell gives you essences, which you use to transcend your units, and 1 essence is worth 10 fragments. I just go over to craft here. So if I want to use, say, an essence of wisdom, it costs me 10 fragments of wisdom to make a single essence of wisdom, which is why Hell is generally considered better than Hard, even despite the less experience. So just focus on getting your team to 5-star, making sure that your team has gear. Joining a guild is huge for your progression. It will almost double your progression once you join a guild, just because it gives you so many fragments, so many skill books, and access to a lot more stamina potions rather. Try to make sure that you at least have someone in the Heroes Inn so that you can be recruiting someone. It doesn't have to be someone amazing, but at least someone decent. You can feel free to ignore it for a few days if you're not getting heroes you like in it, but it's good to get there. Try to stock up on empty potions from May's General Shop. It resets once every hour after you check it. It doesn't reset every hour, but every time you check it for the first time, since it's reset, it'll reset exactly an hour from the time you first checked it. Stock up on empty flasks just so you can get as many as possible to upgrade your DPS and your other heroes to the next tier as quickly as possible once you've awakened them. And try to leech off of dragon runs so that you can get tier 6 or tier 7 dragon gear to outfit your heroes in the best types of gear in the game. Like, just look at how much more powerful these are than like tier 5 stuff. Yeah, tier 5 plus 20 earrings, dragon earrings, 6,700 attack. Tier 7, 16,000 attack. Like, wow. Anyways, guys, I hope this video helped you realize just what you need to do to get to endgame, or mid-game rather. I know it's a little nebulous, but really early game, mid-game, and endgame are somewhat nebulous topics in general, as they're not superbly well defined. It's really just, mid-game is when you don't really feel like an early game player anymore, but you're not an endgame player yet. Anyways, guys, thanks for watching. Subscribe if you like it, and have a good one.